Welcome back to Conversation from the Hearth. Today we are joined by a very special guest. This is Grace Hudgens from Tiger Rock Martial Arts up in, you guys are up in North Austin?
Yes,
And we are so excited to have you here. Miss Hudgens, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited.
That's great. Well, we're very excited to have you here. You know, it's always great to get other instructors' opinions on things. And today we have a very exciting topic to talk about. But before we get into that, can you tell us a little bit about your history, how you get started in the martial arts, what you're doing these days at Tiger Rock?
Absolutely. I'm 21 years old. I have been an instructor since I was just about to turn 19 or 20. And I am currently a Red One in Taekwondo. Tiger Rock is a franchise, which means that it's not associated with any world organizations. They do their own tournaments and their own belt exams. We still do the black belt ranking system, so we have up to ninth degree master, which would be a senior grandmaster, and it takes a very long time to get there. I am currently two belts away from being a black belt myself, and have been teaching martial arts for about 2 years now. And I just love it. I love doing self-defense. I love teaching the students. I love seeing their faces when they learn something new. It's always really exciting for them. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the best jobs, I think, in the whole world. I mean, the amount of impact you can have and the amount of time you can work with a student is really amazing.
Sure.
And that's kind of our topic for today, is, working with children. It is sometimes a balance between trying to keep them entertained and trying to push them to be the best they can be. And I'm sure you've experienced that a lot in your days, your years of instruction. What do you think is when is it too hard and when is it too soft?
Right. So I think that in the traditional day and age that we're in right now, it's a fine balance. So you have to find yourself talking sternly, but not yelling and intimidating, right? So um, the way I teach is I explain it first, I show it, and then I ask them to do it. And then I'll walk around the room and I'll manipulate the skill to the way I want it to look, and also how I want the power for the student to push through that technique and do it the right way. If a student is still not getting it, I will show them again. I will have another student hold the target for me, and I will go through the motion very slowly so that they can see how it is supposed to look. And if they're still not getting it, then I will have them do it on a different piece of equipment. So instead of using a target, I'll move them to a bag so that they can push as hard as they can without hurting somebody by them holding the target.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, that's really good.
That brings
Yeah,
so that brings up a really interesting point is, working. So how hard is too hard to push in the individual student, but also how hard is too hard to push the class? Because when you're working with a larger body of students, your student that's been there for 3 years might be in the same class as the student that's been there for just a couple months, and they're like, "Yes, sir, I'm ready to go. Yes, ma'am, I'm ready to go. Just tell me where to, point and shoot. Let's do it."
Yeah.
Whereas the student that's been there for 2 months is going to go, "Well, wait a minute. I've never done this before in my life." So, right, that ability to take the student through step by step, and say, "Okay, if you still need some work, we're going to move you over here so you can work here." I think that's really interesting. When it comes to the group setting, what is it that you're looking for when you're out there in front of the class that signals to you either, "Oh man, we got to rally the troops right now and get everybody on the same page and push a little harder," or, "Oh man, we're about to drive this off the cliff, we need to pull it back, or else somebody's going to break down, somebody's going to get hurt, or, the class is just going to continue devolving."
Exactly. So When I have a big group of students, I try to have them with a partner. And I feel like that's the best way because they can encourage each other. It's less intimidating that way. But they're working with one piece of equipment. So, for example, that would be a target, or I would split the students up into groups of 5 and have them on a equipment bag so that one person's going at a time, then the next person goes, and the next person, so on and so forth.
Mhm.
Whenever one student doesn't get it, it's a little bit easier to sit the whole group down for about 5 seconds, show them the technique very slowly and what you want to see at the end, the push, or so for example, a side kick. So you want to push to the side, you want your toes to be sideways, you want your hips to be in line, all of that kind of thing. You have to show them slowly the body position, how to hit the technique correctly with the correct part of your foot, and also having extending the technique. That's something that's really hard for kids nowadays, is to push all the way through instead of just stopping their leg when it's kind of bent. So as long as you can show them that in a correct way and in a timely manner, so it takes about maybe 5 to 10 seconds, and have them stand back up and try it again, you want to encourage them to hit as hard as they can, especially when it's on a bag, so that they can get that full extension, right? So again, if someone's not fully getting it, have them move to a different piece of equipment or work with them one-on-one for about 5 seconds, 10 seconds until they finally get it, and then have them move back to the original piece of equipment.
So when you're breaking things down like that and explaining how to do a technique, which is invaluable, I think, you want to go into all those details, but like you said, there's a certain time limit you have on that explanation before it becomes boring. How do you know when
Right.
the time limit has been expired, and how do you how do you balance, trying to really get down to brass tacks and explain exactly what they're supposed to do while trying to keep it entertaining?
So what I like to do is I kind of keep it reward based. So like I said, I'll split the two students into groups of 4 or 5-ish if we're on bags that day. And I'll say, okay, great. First group who gets everybody done to do the kicks 3 times doesn't have to do an exercise. And then the other groups that don't finish first and aren't sitting down as soon as they all finish the kick 3 to 5 times, then they all have to do 10 jumping jacks or 10 push-ups or 10 sit-ups, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Just trying to give them that initiative to do the kick correctly, but also do it with speed and technique and with teamwork. So it incorporates all of those things at the same time, but also encourages them to have that teamwork aspect that martial arts calls for, right? It's not like any other sport. It's something that is very encouraging to see your growth over time. You can't really see things like that in soccer, for example, or volleyball. That one is all individual growth, but as a team, growth as a team is really difficult to find in the modern sports.
I really like this focus on teamwork. It's something that I think a lot of people, when they get into the martial arts, don't realize how much we are a team. I mean, we say dojang in Korean and Taekwondo, and dojang's kind of like your second family. And, dojang literally means place of the way. It's also kind of a spiritual place that we find meaning and in connection with other people. What are some other ways that you're facilitating that teamwork on the floor?
Yeah, so with the not only bag drills, but we do it in our warm-ups as well. So we'll split the groups up into teams with either ladder drills or hurdle drills, cone drills, having them do multiple different things at a time, seeing how well their recall is, asking them to do an instruction, having them stand up and do it, right? Um, it's a very quick turnaround for a student to hear something and then to, come on, go faster, you can do it, all of that kind of stuff. You don't really see all of that in modern sports or in PE class, which is a progressive form based on your rank. So they mostly.
That's a really interesting take on forms training, because I wanted to talk a little bit about forms today. I wasn't sure if you guys were doing, and this could be another example of something that but I have to do it against this person. Wow, and I think that's a great example of something you're going to atone for that form. So that's really funny.
Right.
But also, I'm sure it's effective because they're like, well, I don't want to do push-ups, so I'm going to go work on my form a little bit. It's good.
So you had made mention that you feel like the martial arts and maybe Taekwondo in particular has a level of teamwork that you don't see in other sports, which I think that's really insightful. And what do you think is making that possible? What is facilitating that? Because on one hand, martial arts is a very individual thing. I think a lot of outsiders think it's very individualistic. But on the other hand, it's also very team oriented. What makes it a team sport or team pursuit?
I think it has to do, yes, I think it has to do with the instructors themselves, how they carry themselves in the class and how the class is run. So if you're just having them do individual things all the time, it's going to seem like an individualistic sport. But if you partner them up, or if you break them up into teams and have them have that reward-based or that reward incentive to do something correctly and quickly, then it adds the team aspect. So I think it's not only the way the instructor teaches the class and how they carry themselves in the class, but it's also the students, their attitude, how they carry themselves, how they understand what the instructor is saying, and how they carry out what the instructor is saying. So it kind of is both the instructor and the student. It has to be two people working together to get one result, right? Mm-hmm. So you don't want the instructor to be, come on, guys, you can do it. Oh my goodness, y'all aren't doing it correctly. Let's stop. Because if you stop, that brings down the mood, it brings down the tone, all of that kind of stuff. You have to be an encouraging instructor, but also a critical instructor and making sure they're doing it correctly. But you also have to be motivating, right? So you want to give that incentive for them to do it well and do it correctly.
So that's really interesting. So, our initial topic for today was, when to push and, how hard to push and how to incentivize people to. We're kind of dancing between trying to be entertainers and then also be like teachers who really take our student to that next level. And that's a very difficult thing to balance. And one question that comes out of that is, well, how do you encourage your students to rise above their innate level of rigor and push even harder? And what I've been hearing from you since being this conversation, which I think is really insightful, is one way you can do it is by encouraging all of their peers to encourage them, and by creating that camaraderie amongst the student body. So it's not just your voice that's saying, get in there, keep going, keep pushing yourself, but it's the person right next to them, the person behind them, and the person in front of them. I think it's really great. Sure. What are some other ways that we can encourage students to sort of rise above their initial abilities? Because a lot of students, they come to us because they're having trouble pushing themselves. Maybe they've gained a lot of weight and they're trying to lose it, or they're having trouble setting goals for themselves and they want something structured that's going to help them kind of become more focused in their lives. How do we facilitate that in the martial arts?
Right. So yes. So I would say the best way to do that is by doing something that builds confidence. So, for example, we talked about the forms. That is a confidence builder. It can also be a confidence killer if you don't do it the correct way. So as an instructor, you have to be motivating and tell them something they can improve on, but also something they did really, really well, right? but you have to show them this person we decided did better because they did this. You should work on this so that your form is better, right? It's also really difficult for that whenever they are practicing sparring. Our Taekwondo, we practice sparring as soon as they receive their green belt level 1. And some of the green belts, they've never seen that before. So it's really exciting. But then when they get there, they don't know what to do. They freeze or they run. So you kind of have to show them, okay, this is what you look for. You don't want to have your chest straight out because otherwise you're going to be an easy target. You're going to get hit. It's going to hurt. So you need to turn your body to the side so that you have your shoulder and your hip right there. They can only hit your ribs, or if they're flexible enough, they can kick the back of your head. Yeah. So we try to tell them you want to be at an angle, but you also want to be light on your feet. You don't want to be flat-footed because then you are slow. You want to try and move around as much as possible so that you are a harder target. You are harder to hit. You're harder to get the points on, right? And especially when they first start, they're real slow. Nothing wrong with that. You have to train them how to do that. But if they get hit, most of the time they get really upset and sometimes they cry. So when they cry, you have to, again, motivate them, give them that encouragement. Hey, you did really, really well taking that hit. I know it hurts right now, but you did a great job. You are so strong. Oh my goodness. But then tell them, this is how you fix it. This is how you don't get hit. You have to move around. You have to have your hands up. Exactly. You have to stay light on your feet. If you stay still, you are an easy target. If you move around, it's harder to hit you, right? So you have to find that encouraging motivator for them to not get hit.
It's just getting me really excited for classes because, like you said, like you know, there's just so many things about being an instructor that we can like take home with us at the end of the day and just say, like, man, you know, on one hand, today there was that moment where that student did a great form and like everybody's like, wow, what a great form. And then on the other hand, you know, yet again, this student got hit in the side of the head because they weren't keeping their hands up, right? And I really like what you said about, you know, it's kind of hard to articulate for somebody who might not be a martial artist or martial arts instructor, but saying you did a really good job taking that hit, right? Somebody might see that as a failure, as somebody like, oh, you got hit, like you're bad, you're not good enough, right? But over and over again on the mats, you know, you see those kids who just get out there, they get blasted, and they're like, and then they just hunker down. They get
right back up. Yep, they get right back up.
That is the kind of tenacity. That's the kind of fortitude that the person who's just kicking them around is not going to learn. They're not going to learn to take the hit and keep going. They're just like that. And so when, you know, typically I've seen when that person who's usually doing a lot of the kicking gets hit hard, they go, like, what was that? What happened? You're like, that's what you've been doing to all these other people this whole time. So yeah. Keeping that motivation, whether it's, you know, we say a lot, like you win or you learn, right? And so it's like, okay, you got hit, what'd you learn? Let's get back in there, keep it going.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's kind of multiple ways to raise the rigor. You know, on one side, like on the sparring side, raising the rigor means you take a hit and you don't get scared. Instead of you take a hit and you get like excited to get back in there and push yourself to be better. But on the other side, like let's say we're doing pumse or forms, you know, to get to a better level, you have to be more patient, you know, be willing to do that form a second, third, fourth time and run through the exact same thing many, many, many times. That's a different kind of rigor, you know, or, you know, you have to be good at holding a stance for a really long time until your legs are shaking, or holding your leg out there for a really long time until your leg is shaking. Those are all very different types of rigor, but they all need to rise in order to be a better martial artist. You talked about teamwork being really important. You've talked about praise, correct praise, Mr. Trader as well. Are there any other tactics that we can employ to help students, rise above their initial abilities, their initial, inner fire, I guess, is what I might be looking for.
Yeah. So I think a lot of students come to martial arts because of either something's happening at school and the parent wants to find something to help. For example, bullies. There could also be they're really aggressive, or it could be something where they have a mental block. Personally, for me, I have ADHD, so it's a little hard for me to stay focused for a long period of time. I was diagnosed when I was 11 years old. So my parents tried to get me into different types of school sports. I went to a private school. So if I had gone to a public school, most likely I would have gone to just one sport and then done something extracurricular. But since I went to a private school, I could do any of the sports I wanted to throughout the entire year. So my sports were cheerleading and golf. And then I also did theater and musical theater. If I had gone to a public school, I probably would have been in martial arts since I was very little. My aunt is actually the one who got me into it. She is currently a 6th-degree master black belt in Taekwondo, and she encouraged me to get into it because I, as an adult woman, am more susceptible to older men trying to do not very good things. So I got into it for self-defense. And I think that that is the biggest thing right now, especially for younger kids in school, how to defend themselves against a bully and how to do it the right way so that they don't either get in trouble or that the bully stops bothering them. So we always tell our students, always use your voice first. And if it keeps happening in the same instance more than 3 times, you're allowed to retaliate. But we tell them the teacher only sees the retaliation, don't see the initial contact, right? Of what the bully is saying, what the bully's doing. If they put their hands on you and you put your hands back on them, they're only going to see you putting your hands on them. They're not going to see the bully put their hands on you first, right? So you have to preface it with that and say, hey, you might get called into the principal's office, but you use self-defense the correct way without hurting them seriously and defended yourself, right? You never want to just take all the hits. It's the same thing with sparring. You don't want to continue to take the hits. You don't want to be an easy target. You want to be a target that is hard to hit and hard to break down those walls. So what I mean by that is your endurance or your attitude. You don't want to have that be broken by somebody. You want to have that be you want it to be you. You don't want someone to break down you, right? So with those instances, we tell our students 3 times you can use your self-defense, but like we practice in sparring, when we practice other people, we don't hit as hard as we can. We never hit it as hard as we can unless it's against an adult, right? If an adult is trying to hurt me, I can hit as hard as I want, right? But if it's somebody at school, I cannot. I have to hit enough to make them not want to come back, right? Hit them hard enough to make them not want to come back at me because they're either scared or they're hurt, right? So it's again that fine balance. You have to expose the students to it, but you have to explain why this is okay and this is not okay.
It's almost like we've flipped the topic and now we're talking about how to discourage people as opposed to encourage them. Because we're trying to figure out how to discourage people from picking on other people. And that is it has some elements of science, but it's also very much an art form where you're, if you just come back, like let's say somebody approaches me and, starts like kind of teasing me, and maybe he does like push me a little bit, but it's not, when is the right moment to defend yourself? It's sometimes hard. It's very hard. I mean, I was a kid once and I was in school and I got picked on a few times, and it was never a very clear case of like, okay, now this is the moment that I can retaliate, and it's unequivocal. Like this person deserves it. It was always these kind of murky gray areas, and especially young kids, you say, even if you have a good rule, like you guys seem to have a very good rule, like 3 times, then you can use your self-defense. But if you use your self-defense only, a portion of your power, not your full power. I mean, that's very good advice, but even that advice is not, it's very scientific, but it's not always going to be the right advice for the right moment, because you never know. It could some little kid who's half your size coming up and just kind of trying to be a nuisance. And then even if you use like 60% of your power and you punch him in the face, like that's probably not going to be appropriate, But if there's a really big kid who's, a couple heads taller than you, he's like in 5th grade and you're in 1st grade, and he's coming up and he threw you off the picnic table and you landed on your head and you got up and he pushed you again, and then you give him a little 50% or 60% of your power punch, he's probably just going to laugh, and then he's going to do it again, and it's not going to work. So just kind of to articulate how nuanced that really is, it's a very challenging thing. And what I try to tell my students is, a lot of people come to me and they want to learn how to defend themselves, and they're going to learn that. But over the process of learning how to defend themselves, they're going to learn how to be more confident and in control in a situation, and more of a leader in their community. And that last one is going to be more important than anything else that they learn here, because it's going to take them out of a situation of being picked on and make them put them into a situation where people are looking up to them. And it's almost easier just to take yourself completely out of the equation than to try to fight that nuanced battle.
Exactly. And we always tell our students, I didn't mention this, but we always tell our students, use your voice first and get an adult. So if someone tries to come at you, hey, why are you doing that to me? What was the point of that? Was that really necessary? Tell an adult immediately after it happens, hey, this person's bothering me. They said this or they did this. Then the second time that they come up to me, I go and ask for the principal, and I explain exactly what happened in detail of the first occurrence, and letting them know this is the second time they're bothering me. Then when it's the third time, you're allowed to react, right? You don't want to just keep taking those hits or just keep taking all of the negative comments or digs at you. You don't want to have that happen to you, right? So you have to react at that point. It's not a point of, this person's bothering me one time, I react. No, it's, I told somebody about it the first time. The second time, I told the principal about it. They talked to him. He's still bothering me. Now I react. Hey, this happened first. This happened second. He's doing it again. I reacted. I'm not just going to sit there and keep taking it, right? So it's not necessarily if they just pushed me one time and I react, or pushed me 2 times and I react. No, it's, they bugged me once, I told somebody about it. They bugged me twice, I told the highest person I can about it. They bugged me a third time. Now it's my job to take care of it, because these people tried to take care of it and he's still doing it. So there's something wrong. I might get in trouble a little bit for reacting, but it's more important at that point to stand up for myself than it is to not get in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. Very nuanced topic.
Yeah, that conversation is, I mean, we could go on long time down that road for sure. So kind of pivoting back to talking about, how hard is too hard, how soft is too soft. We were talking about a lot of focus on the student side of things. Okay, so when I'm instructing, here I am in class. Now, you had mentioned at the beginning, you are teaching those 4 to 11-year-old or 4 to 15-year-old classes, but then you're also jumping into those 16 plus adult classes as well. And when you find yourself in the student position where it's like, all right, I'm not running the show today, I'm here to say yes sir, yes ma'am, put my head down and put in my work. How do you know that you're getting close to your point where you're like, oh, now we're pushing it like really hard? Or conversely, how do you know if you need to take it upon yourself to push a little harder? So an example I can use for myself is sometimes we're running, just doing laps around the dojang, and I find myself just focusing on me. If I'm like, man, I could be going a little faster, but I want to make sure that I'm respecting, whoever's in front of me, then that's a moment where I say, okay, start doing high knees, right? So instead of just my little jog, I'm like, okay, well, let me just push it, push it, push it. What's an example of something like that for yourself, or an example of sometime your instructor pushed you further than you thought you could go, and you were like, man, I'm glad that they did that?
Yeah. So for me, it mostly comes into play at tournaments, not necessarily in class. But so it's finding that endurance point. So I can't keep going, but I have to.
Yes.
At tournaments for us, like I said, Tiger Rock's a franchise, so they do tournaments with all the Tiger Rocks. Nobody else, just all the Tiger Rocks. So specifically in forms, I don't want to be, what's the word for it? I don't want to be bragging about it. I want to stay humble. But at the Nationals tournament, I competed as a brown level 3, and I received a gold medal in forms for my ring, and then an all-star medal in forms, which is the highest medal that you can get for your rank.
Yes,
I got gold for that one, and then I got gold in board breaking. So forms is really important to me. It's very particular. You have to teach it a certain way because the techniques that you learn in forms help you develop throughout everything else you're going to do in Taekwondo. You're going to learn certain skills and forms that you can perfect in sparring, that you can perfect for board breaking, all of that stuff, even blocks. You're going to use every block that you have in your form for sparring, for self-defense, all of those things. So forms are very important to me. Anytime I compete at a tournament, that's the first thing we do is forms. It makes you tired doing it about 6 times, 7 times if you're going to go for first or second place or third place. So I have experience doing my form over and over and over again at full power, at full speed, all of those things. Learning how to breathe correctly was really, really hard, especially at the beginning, knowing you have to go every single move, you have to breathe out. You have to breathe out every move. Otherwise, you're going to lose your breath. You're going to pass out potentially because it's a lot of moves. It's a long time to be doing that, especially if the forms are about 2 minutes each. 6 times, back to back, full power, full speed, all your techniques hitting really hard, super strong, all of that kind of stuff. It's exhausting.
Yeah.
And then after that, you have to turn around and spar people for 2 minutes, getting points, trying to win, all of that stuff. And then you spar a bag and you have to try and hit the dots, even though you're tired and your legs hurt and your body hurts. And then You have to do the techniques on the boards and break all the boards and make sure that you get all the techniques hitting the right spot, even though you're tired.
Mhm.
So that's the biggest endurance part for me, is after I do my form 3 times, I'm exhausted. I still have 3 more times to go. Then I have to spar. Then I have to do sparring the bag. Then I have to board break. So finding that for me is like, okay, I want to win. I want to get the medal. I have to keep going. That's where it is for me. In class, I am not a cardio girl. I'm more of a weightlifter. So running around the room, doing all the things really, really fast, that's not me. I'm more, okay, I can do sit-ups with a medicine ball. I can do squats with a medicine ball. I can do throwdowns with a medicine ball, all that kind of stuff. That's still exhausting to me. But just straight running, straight jogging, straight ladder drills, super quick, super fast feet, all that stuff, that's not me. So doing that stuff in class, really, really difficult for me to keep going, because I know my body's exhausted, but I also know that this is just the warm-up. If I can't make it through the warm-up, how am I going to do the rest of class, right?
Yeah.
So I have to modify it. So whatever the instructor's doing, I have to do a little bit of it, but also with more of a muscle building aspect instead of like a lung endurance aspect, because I get that with forms as well.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Thank you.
It's kind of like give and take, because as an instructor, you have to give respect to the current instructor, but you also have to know what's right for your body, and you have to know what my breaking point is, and I know my breaking point is running. So I have to slow it down. So whenever we're running around the room, I do a light jog. If we're doing punches, uppercuts, hooks while we're running, I do that as well. Sometimes instead of running, I'll do shuffles across the floor, trying to keep light on my feet, warm my body up for sparring. If we're doing drills where it's straight running down the floor, doing a drill, running back, doing a drill, running back, all of that kind of stuff, I'll do a light jog, try to keep my heart rate up, but not to the point where I pass out. And then if we're doing suicide drills, so one cone back, second cone back, third cone back, all that kind of stuff, again, I'll do a jog, just because you want to keep your heart rate at that point that's a good pace, but you also don't want to keep your heart rate at the point where it's like, I'm dying, I can't breathe, you know?
I'm curious about your thoughts on like when you're
we don't allow that.
no.
At our school, leadership by example is very important. So whatever the instructor does, everyone else has to do exactly the same thing, or it's going to lead to class chaos. If let's say I start running laps as hard as I can, I say, Mr. Trader, jump in with me, and Mr. Trader's just kind of like dilly-dallying or doing crisscross or whatever, something else that he wants, you better believe the next person behind him and the person behind him and the person behind him are just going to start doing whatever they want. Whole class is going to fall apart. Plus, I'll tell you right now, I can't push myself half as hard as my master can push me. A lot of times, we all are kind of lazy deep down inside. I'm like, yeah, that's probably good enough. I'm getting a sweat in, and I'm kind of pushing myself a little bit. But that's not going to make a champion. A champion's made because somebody else is pushing them harder, encouraging them. The teamwork you were talking about, where you had the team encouraging them, instructor encouraging them, praise, correct, praise. That's what takes people to that next level. And yeah, you don't want to go in too hard before they can handle it. Like if I don't throw white belts into the advanced class and say, go nuts, full contact sparring, anything goes, in your first day. But, with our school, and I'm sure you have a similar system over there at Tiger Rock, like the beginner class feels different than the intermediate, which feels different than the advanced. And you slowly build up the confidence and the physical fitness to handle the more intense curriculum and class structure. And so I'm a big believer in trusting in your instructor and keeping my ego out of it entirely and saying, look, I might have these thoughts, but if I try to hold on to my thoughts while my instructor is teaching me, I got a cup that's too full. He can't fill it up anymore. And I'm not really being a good student. That's how I feel. I know it's a little direct criticism there, but that's how I feel, honestly. And that's what I tell all my staff and instructors. And I think we do a pretty good job of that. My instructors.
I should have prefaced. I have a lot of medical history. I have 2 very weak ankles, so running's very hard on my ankles. And then I have an ACL history. I tore an ACL in my knee, and I had surgery on it when I was 16, and it's still not as good as my other knee. So it's very difficult for me to run without it taking a huge toll on my body for the rest of the week or even the month. So I have to modify it for my own health. But for my regular students that are in the class with me, taking the class at the same time I am, they know that history. They know that I cannot run the way that they can.
I'm not talking about you in particular. I'm just saying in general, that's kind
right,
of right. Floor. And, I do get people come in and they got all sorts of issues. And, if they got a hurt knee or something, I'll say, like, let's be careful with the jumping, here and blah, blah. We might need to modify some stuff. But provided there's nothing wrong with them, we got to encourage them. And it's becoming increasingly more common for people to try to control their environment. And that's exactly what stops you from being the best you can be. You have to be comfortable with being out of control and having somebody push you beyond your limitations in order for you to rise to be the best that you can be. I mean, I really feel strongly in that. How many times have you gone on the mats and tried to work out on your own and gotten like a really, really good workout that you can barely stand up for? It's not very common, and they're very few and far between. Like the best way to get a great workout is to say, sir, tell me what to do, and you just do whatever they say. It's the reason why everyone wants a trainer and everyone does group physical fitness lessons. And it's one of the reasons why this is so important, why Tiger Rock is so important, why Rising Phoenix Martial Arts is so important, because we're offering an invaluable service. Like, these people think that they'll go into their backyard and they'll work on the bag and they'll get fit and feel great. It's like, probably not. Like, if you can do that, you're like the 0.001%. Most people need someone to help coach them.
So, and I think too, that's the whole conversation and topic for today is, where is that line? Where is that line?
Yeah.
Like, because there are going to be people who have, certain medical histories and just things where they're constantly adapting, constantly feeling it out. And so that's what I was really curious about today, because I've been noticing on the floor, like, sometimes I'm like, man, I need to turn up the heat right now. And sometimes I'm like, man, I need to turn down the heat right now, or else this class is going to like mutiny.
And that's the balance with teaching, is trying to figure that out, because you want to push somebody to their limit without breaking them. Some people, they'll brag, they say, oh, my school is so intense, I throw up every single day I train. I'm like, then your instructor is really bad, because he should be taking you right to the edge where you're about to throw up and then pulling back. You should have thrown up a few times in your life where you're not really training, because if you get right to the edge, you're going to fall over a few times. But if you're doing it every single day, then there's a problem there. We need to pull it back a little bit. But the thing is, that's such a bragging right, because most people don't even get close to throwing up, because if they start breaking a sweat and they start freaking out. And sometimes it's not even that. I get sometimes these days, I've been teaching martial arts for 33. Well, no, I've been in martial arts for 33 years. I've been teaching for over 20 years. And in that time, I've started to see people come in with these weird conditions that I've never heard before. Like, I'm just feeling kind of anxious today, sir. I'm not sure I can really get out there and do my full performance. I'm like, what do you mean anxious? No one ever said that when I was growing up doing martial arts. Like, that's not legitimate. Like, that means you need to get out there. You're feeling anxious because you're out of shape. You haven't been here in like 3 weeks and you need to push yourself. That's why you're feeling anxious. So it's but it's also hard because you sometimes concerns are legitimate, and you have to kind of be a good decipher of what is somebody's, like, the back of their mind trying to tell the front of their mind that it's okay to not push themselves, and what is a legitimate concern that if you push them they're going to hurt themselves. And I think that comes from years of experience working with people and knowing what they're capable of. I'll give you a good example. The other day we were working with our little warriors, and I knew that this was going to be a big deal for these kids because they're only like 4 or 5 years old. And we had them do splits, and then one at a time we had the instructor kind of stretch them out, and they're barely pulling on these kids. But kids have never been pulled on before and never been put into a split where their knees have to be fully straight, and all this kind of stuff. And so they start, like, before you, like, I mean, literally like the tiniest pulled out, like freaking out. And I know, like, when I was a kid, before I would jump off the bunk bed, do a split, go down and come back up when I was 5, 6 years old, and I was able to do that. And so I know they're super flexible. Like, kids are incredibly flexible at that age. So they're not going to get hurt. It's just going to be a psychological thing that we have to get through. And a good instructor knows just how hard to push them so they're not getting hurt or traumatized, but they're getting a little bit tougher, a little bit stronger, so that the next time they step on the mat and do the same thing, they approach it with more resolve, and they need less courage and confidence to push through. Sorry for the spiel.
No, it's good. I love teaching the 4 and 5-year-olds. They're my favorite.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like I guess for
Like
me
lion
it's kind
taming,
of
right?
like being,
Shh. I'm just kidding.
yeah, it's kind of like being that one authority figure that is different than mom and dad. Because they're at that age where they're either going into preschool or they're going into kindergarten. Somebody different than mom and dad who's never taught me before. So either sometimes they're scared or sometimes they're real rowdy. So you gotta you gotta find that firm balance between I'm not mom, I'm someone different, and also I want to be a motherly figure so that they can come to me if they need help. They can come to me if they're in pain or they're struggling with something, like in class. If they don't get it, they can come and ask for help, right? But you also want to be separate so that you're not the person who they come to. This person's bugging me. Like, yes, they're in class with you. They might get on your nerves a little bit, but they're not a bully. Like, they're trying to learn too, right? So it's again that fine line, because those little kids focus on every little thing, and you have to dismiss the little things, but you have to work on the big things. So if someone calls someone a name, immediately that's not okay. If someone is just like, hey, how are you today? And then the other little kid's like, I don't want to talk to you. Then it's like, okay, this person's supposed to be our friend. We're working together. We're all on the same team here. We're trying to work on self-defense and how to protect ourselves, all of that kind of stuff, right? So that little thing would be a little thing. But if someone is like, you're meanie, I don't like you, then you have to, again, address that, hey, that's not okay. We don't tell our friends that they're mean and that we don't like them. We always try to like everybody, right? We always try to be nice to everybody. All of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's I mean, this is kind of a whole nother area to talk about, but it's a fine line between trying to be the arbiter of what's going on there and try to mediate out the situation. Mediator is probably the word I'm looking for. And also let those kids sort it out themselves. Because if you're always mediating their disputes, then they never learn how to do it themselves. And so, in the really extreme situations that I have to get involved in, usually the kids aren't asking me to get involved. And when they usually ask for me to get involved, it's usually a situation that they could resolve themselves. And
Mhm.
not always the case, but I think, you know, that's a really hard thing to balance because our sort of maternal and paternal instincts kick in, and we want to mediate it, and we want to say like, okay, you guys, like, you need to come to my office, we need to talk it out and deal with it, and we do that a lot. But I think also a lot of times I tell them in the office, like, you guys need to sort this out yourself. Like, you can't be relying on me to figure this out for you. You need to express how you feel to this person out on the mats. Like, if they're hitting you too hard, then they're hitting you too hard. And you need to tell them. If you had told
Yeah.
them at the beginning that they were hitting you too hard, we would have never gotten to the point where you freaked out and punched them in the face because you got
Mhm.
angry, because you weren't being communicative. So,
So,
yeah. Anyway, we've gone way off topic and we've taken up a good hour of your time. So we really appreciate you coming
Yes,
on
ma'am.
and sharing your wisdom with us and our students. We wishing you guys the best of luck out up there in Tiger Rock, and um, let's stay connected, and we'd love to talk to you about another topic sometime in the future.
Of course. Thank you guys.